everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is me. It is Nate. So sorry about last time. We need like massive coup attempts to happen before we record, not directly after, because then it takes a week before we can get to it.
They
Nate.
were literally recording we were recording while it was going on, and we didn't even know about it because it hadn't really broken out yet. And then,
well, it was still morning for me. We were still about 2 hours. The rally was started, but the break-in hadn't started. So. Yeah.
We could have done an emergency episode, but every other of your favorite podcasts did an emergency episode, and we wanted to see how things cooked out a little bit. And of course, we came to discover from the news, from reports, from arrests, from indictments, there was a significant number of both
troops.
Active and retired military involved in this. Who could have seen that coming?
The troops. Don't we love to support and respect and salute our fucking troops as they go and get shot in the neck for their fucked up beliefs on what the Constitution is.
Well, yes, we had an Air Force veteran with deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan get shot in the neck because when the guy in the suit with a gun pointing at her said, "If you come in, I'm going to shoot you." And then she's like, I wonder what he means, and tried to come in anyway and got shot in the neck and killed. Or the military information support operations captain. We used to call that PSYOPs, but then they got embarrassed for trying to do PSYOPs on like American senators who were visiting Afghanistan. So the Army was like, the solution to this problem is not to fire anyone, but to rename the branch MISO. A MISO captain was not only involved, but she led a group of 100 people from North Carolina. She lives in Southern Pines, which is like a Fort Bragg suburb. It's on the far side of Fort Bragg, and it's famous for being a place where a ton of Delta people live because the Delta training compound is on that side of Fort Bragg. It's separate from Bragg, and it's like on the west side of the whole military like training area. And she was apparently already in the news in Southern Pines for basically doing like staging a protest where she was refusing to wear masks like anywhere in Southern Pines. And like, so basically she's insane. She was an active duty Army officer. I saw it saying she's resigned, but like, you can't resign that fast as an Army officer. That doesn't exist. It's not like being a fucking cop.
She resigned her commission months before because she posted a video of herself ripping down caution tape at a playground and got a Gomar for it. So she was, when they say, oh, she's resigned her commission, she resigned her commission months ago when she was doing batshit crazy stuff, and then got a general officer memorandum of record, which is basically, for those of you not in the military, that is a dead stop on your career. You will go no further. That's a general saying you fucked up and you're going to get a letter on your permanent record. But it's a permanent record that actually exists.
Well, it depends.
She was on her way out.
It depends. Just FYI, it depends. So as an officer, Gomar is General Officer Memorandum of Administrative Reprimand, and it's basically you being told, like Francis said, that you fucked up. It can go in your local file, which is to say it's still going to fuck your career, but if it goes in your local file, that means it doesn't follow you. It's just a thing that like while you are assigned to whatever installation command you're in, it stays there. If it goes in your permanent file, then it's permanently attached to you and like, you're not going anywhere. You're like, you may not necessarily be administratively separated immediately. It depends on what you did, but you're not. I mean, all right. You might get promoted if you have like an Iraq War fucking surge situation, but chances are, because there was a joke they used to call it no captain left behind and no major left behind, was that like the promotion rates for major and lieutenant colonel were something like between 95 and 99% in that period. Whereas like when my dad went through during the Cold War drawdown, it was quite low. I mean, I don't want to cite figures and say, 100% no, this is what it was, but I believe it was less than half of majors were making lieutenant colonel, and probably a greater number, but still a far smaller number than 99% of captains were making major. So yeah, it was basically, if you get a Gomar, your career's pretty fucked unless the U.S. invades Iraq and needs every breathing body it can get its fucking hands on. So you have troops involved. There was an anecdote in, I believe, a Politico story about troops trying to enter the building by flashing their military ID cards. Now, of course, that could be a lot of things. That could be like you've got your retiree Deere's ID card, Francis. It could be people who are in the Guard or Reserves. They've got their ID cards. It could be active duty people. But regardless, there were troops there. There was a West Point graduate. He'd separated. He was a civilian at this point, but a West Point graduate who was like the general counsel of some company. There was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. He was one of the dudes with zip ties.
The Q shaman.
Oh, really? The Q shaman was in the military too?
He's a Navy vet. 2 years in, got out as an E2. He got separated because he refused vaccinations. And I was gonna. Now, Nate, though, it was the anthrax vaccination, so I get it.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
but also, like, I don't know about the anthrax vaccination when he was getting it versus when I got it in 2004. But also, it's very funny that this guy got booted out of the Navy for refusing to do vaccinations, and now he's dressing up like a fucked up Braveheart with brain damage.
Yeah, so I happen to notice, I mean, because obviously I don't really use Facebook that much in the sense that I don't post, I don't share things, I don't really feel like it's a good idea for me to be sharing my political views with the people I know in real life because most of them are insane, and I've kept the understanding that it's at least useful to have Facebook be like a thing to let me know if somebody's in trouble and needs help. As much as I don't like their opinions, like if they're people that I know from my previous life, it's perhaps the right thing to do. But over time, it's gotten to the point where I've had to start muting a lot of these people because they got so insane, and it was like kill Antifa, kill commies, helicopter rides, etc. Like a lot of folks from my old unit got radicalized, and yeah, weirdly. Funny, the folks who were on a deployment that they feel as though they were lied to about the whole Bergdahl thing, like they seem to be the ones that particular unit, they seem to be the most prone to radicalization of all the units that I've been in. But also that could just be my own, sort of spotty perception in the sense that confirmation bias, if you will. The unit that I was in Korea, there were plenty of people who turned out to be crazy, but also there was just way more churn in the sense that like people were constantly coming in and out. And there are a lot more, you go into a mech unit or a heavy unit, like people are slightly less insane. Like the craziest people in the military, in my opinion, are in like light combat units, like in an airborne unit. But I saw so much of this stuff and I started drilling down into Facebook to see like what people were sharing. And the biggest refrain, it seems to be one of two things from veterans. It's either an active military. It's either this is not true, these are all BLM and Antifa infiltrators, or where were you last summer when cities were burning across America? And it's just like
all the cities that burn to the ground.
Yeah, they burn to the ground. They just aren't there anymore.
Yeah, Ferguson, Missouri actually does not exist anymore. Just a smoking crater because the one CVS got put on fire.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's like this response of like, where were you when that was happening to the Joint Chiefs of Staff statement that just recently came out, which is funny because if I remember correctly, the Joint Chiefs also put out a statement about the riots, basically saying like, we uphold people's rights to protest, but like we can't condone destruction of property and blah, 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 like the most, boilerplate lib thing they could say. Like it's what you would expect the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the U.S. Armed Forces to say. Similarly with this, like, this is a thing that we can't tolerate. Their take is basically our job in the military is to secure the civilian government and secure a civilian transfer of power. We serve the civilian government. We will never support any group that's trying to overthrow a democratic election in this country, by force. That's not what we do, which, I mean, you can argue about the sensitivities or the desires or the beliefs of the people involved and the people in the military. And I think that's a very valid question to have or discussion to have, and we are going to have it. But I mean, in terms of like the official statement that you would expect the Joint Chiefs Staff to make, that's it right there. That's the thing they're supposed to say. That's what they're going to say. And the response is the exact same. It's either BLM and Antifa are infiltrating to make Trump look bad. There was a Derek post, if you're familiar with the account, Derek, bunch of numbers, who is a very prolific poster. I'm going to try to quote it from memory instead of reading it off my phone, but it was something to the effect of me and all of my friends who were 19-year-old Antifa soy troopers convincingly dressed up as 46-year-old PTSD HVAC repairmen from Nebraska to make Trump look bad. Yes, I mean, you either believe that or you believe that there is like an unfair liberal bias in the military that is favoring condemnation of this attack, but did not condemn riots, etc. Which, I mean, is complete bullshit. But if you live in Copland, an alternate universe, Facebook, social media, where all you think about is Antifa and the libs, then it absolutely makes sense that you probably did not pay any heed to when that statement was made condemning destruction of property, or you found it to be not bloodthirsty enough, and your sensitivities probably lie with these people, and so you have to come up with dumb, lame, basically time-wasting needle dick excuses. And the thing I would say is that these are the whiniest fucking people on earth. They are pathetic losers who are huge whiners, huge babies, and all they can do is cry about how it's not fair the way that they are being mistreated and how the libs have so much of an advantage over them, even though literally everything in America is oriented around the whims and caprices of insane right-wing people, and has been basically since the civil rights movement, when the Republicans basically absorbed the Southern Democrat vote and decided well, if we do racism, we'll constantly get reelected. There never has there been a group in American history more catered to than these fucking people, and all they can do is cry about it.
Yep. And so coming from this, as you said, the Joint Chiefs of Staff are talking about all these, we can't accept these, we can't do this, we can't do that. I see a lot of this coming from a lot of mill Twitter, which I expect from them, but when I see it from these generals, especially after the Fort Hood report came out a couple of months ago, and after you see a lot of this is an outrage, this is terrible, you just see a lot of pretty words on Twitter from the people in charge. And I would love, there's a lot of talk now about how command and generals are starting to no, we need to go through our people, the capital city police are arresting their own people because they're found out that they may have been sympathetic, or they may have helped out the break-in, insurrection, coup attempt, whatever we're fucking calling it. And I want to believe, Nate, that all these generals suddenly do care about white nationalism, even though that there's been reports on reports on reports about how white nationalists are infiltrating the military and how they are doing all these things. And this didn't happen in a fucking vacuum, man. If you didn't see this coming, if you didn't see some kind of violence coming, they brought IEDs, man. They brought pipe bombs. They were coordinated. Not everybody, but enough were. And there's plenty of evidence to show that they were probably aided and abetted by people in Congress. And so now that we finally have somebody who attempted to do a coup, and let's be honest, was almost successful. They were not that far off from executing a senator or a representative on Twitter, on Periscope or whatever. And now we want to do something about it. And I just really feel, I don't know, man, I feel it's a little too late at this point. Trying to slam the barn door closed when the horse is out and the barn is on fire,
I mean, I think the thing about it is that I don't know if you could call it a coup. That's just my take, because there weren't enough powerful people endorsing it. Once it became obvious what was happening, the people who could have made that call didn't. So I think that it was.
I feel there was a lot of sitting back and waiting until somebody had power. I feel because I fully believe that the Lauren Bobberts and the Josh Hawleys of Congress and the Senate would have, if it was successful, would have just been well, this is what happens, and now we're in charge.
Yeah, sic semper tyrannis or whatever, and then now we're in charge.
Doesn't matter if they were a part of it, if they were planning it or not. I know 100% that it wouldn't have been oh, this is fucked up, we shouldn't have done this. It's so terrible that my side is violently in control of things now and can call all the shots. 100% they would have been behind it. So it doesn't matter. It was a coup attempt and we don't have to. The fucking terminology doesn't matter. I
think it does. I think it does matter in the sense that I think that it's important to address that. I feel as though. I agree with you that they were kind of trying to ride this out and see what it got them. But I also think that the thing you've got to bear in mind is these people are really dumb. They don't really have much of an attention for consequences. What they thought was going to what I think personally what they thought was going to happen was that this would just be enough of a spectacle that it would be a rallying cry for them to get donations and them to get, to increase their fan bases. I genuinely think that the Josh Hawleys and et cetera didn't expect it to go as far as it did. And I think that's reflected by his incredibly tone-deaf stuff about him complaining about his book getting canceled, when, now he's literally getting condemned by Republicans in Missouri.
Yeah, we don't fucking like Josh Hawley. And to be fair, we didn't like Josh Hawley to begin with. Josh Hawley was just the Republican running against the Democrat that nobody liked too, because Claire McCaskill fucking sucked too. So, and at some point I'm gonna get Brock back on, and he and I are gonna discuss Missouri politics to the boredom of most of you. But now that Josh Hawley is back in the news, fist raised in support of I do not believe that Josh Hawley had anything to do with it, but also I'm not going to sit there and correct anybody, because fuck Josh Hawley. And if he gets run out of, if an Eric Greitens situation happens where he steps on his dick so hard that he's actually expelled from politics forever, fucking cool. I don't care what you call him. Just get him the fuck out of here.
Yeah, and I think that's something I would point out too, is that in the grand scheme of things, we can look at this and be like, all right, well, the military at the senior level was not amenable to this at all. And had they been, you'd have a serious problem. It does seem like they're, given the inability for the people in Congress to like get relief from the Guard or to activate units and such, that there were people in the Department of Defense, probably in the political appointee side, I would guess, who were more or less slow rolling it, which is insane to me. And I think that's going to get investigated. But I don't want to, it's not necessarily useful to speculate too much about that, because what we do know is, I don't think any of these people thought they were going to get as far as they did. And then once they did, it just sort of like, it just got, I don't know, it just became this like celebration.
The dog caught the car and didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, well, the dog caught the car and then decided to beat a cop to death with a fire extinguisher and an American flag.
I'm going to say, no matter what Black Lives Matter protests, never dragged a cop and beat him to death with an American flag. So,
and you know what? They have the fucking right to. They absolutely have the fucking right to. Like, I'm not going to say it's a good idea, but I understand why people who, are protesting in opposition to the just brutalization and dehumanization that they experience on the part of the American police, who are basically the organization that has vacuumed up all of the money that used to go towards us having a functioning state. I understand why they would be mad enough to want to fucking kill cops. Now, that's a very different thing than saying you should go out and kill cops.
Yeah, don't kill cops. It's not going to be good for optics. Yeah. As you can see. Currently.
But what blows my mind is that these people, who everything about them is like, no one is allowed to have erasers on their pencils in school because I think somehow a cop is being disrespected. They show up and they murder a fucking cop.
Because it's never been Blue Lives Matter. It has when the cops are on my side. It's not about respecting the troops and respecting, because Nate, you and I, even if I was still in, they would, people like that would have no problem but fucking slamming me up against a wall and gunning me down. Doesn't matter if I'm a troop, I'm a leftist. My politics outweighs everything to these people, and either you're politically on the side of Trump and the Republicans, or politically you're not. I wish that I could explain to these people that the vast majority of troops and cops are just people trying to go about their day. Like we see, of course, you always see the dumbasses with the Punisher logos, and you see the Blue Lives Matter stickers, and you hear the really loud and shitty cops and really loud and shitty troops because they're really loud and shitty. Like they're just loud. Everybody else is just like, yeah, I do a job. I show up, I get benefits, I get money, and then I go home for the day. And I tell people to keep off the grass. That's the normal position of a normal person who's working these jobs. So when they're faced with being told you don't belong here by a cop, by somebody who's ostensibly on their side, it doesn't become like, oh man, maybe I should have the. Maybe we should do something. Maybe we should slow down and think about what we're doing. It's no, you're the enemy, and it's a light switch. You go from, hey, you're on my side. Oh, I can't come in here. You're now my enemy, and because you're my enemy, and because I believe that what I'm doing is a righteous cause, your death means nothing. Your death is necessary, and that's the mentality there.
Yeah, well, I got to disagree with you on the point about. Because I think here's the thing, right? Whether you're a troop or a cop, like, no matter what, you are wearing the same uniform as the people who are committing the worst atrocities, as a part of your organization. So, I look at it this way. I'm sure there are cops who are just punching the clock, because, friends of mine have met cops like that when being booked after being mass arrested by cops who aren't just punching the clock. But the fact of the matter is that they wear the same uniform, and we wore the same uniform as the people committing the Haditha massacre. Like, when you get down to it, the Mahmoudiyya massacre, they wore the same uniforms as you and I did. Like, ultimately, in the eyes of the people affected, we are absolutely the same. And I don't think that that's a thing that you can, like, argue your way out of. Like, you are part of an organization that, at its extremities, at its worst, is committing wholesale abuses of power, war crimes in the case of the troops, massive levels of abuse and violence on the part of the police. And you can't get away from that. Like, if you put on that uniform, you cannot expect to be seen as, like, somehow one of the good ones. Like, that doesn't matter. That's never mattered. And that to me is an argument to, and I'm not saying you're making this argument, but the people who be like, well, don't judge me by the worst. Well, you know what, man? I'm sorry, but like, at a certain point, when after seeing, 1,000 videos last year of cops just brutalizing people for no reason, just crushing the skull of a fucking septuagenarian anti-war activist because he tried to give them their helmet back, like, just murdering black people left and right, brutalizing protesters, beating up kids, watching videos of cops fucking practically doing like barrel rolls to just like punch like a 14-year-old black girl in the face because like she was loud at a pool party. Like, just seeing what they do constantly, like, I just don't have the ability to discern anymore. Like, the reason I don't wear a uniform anymore is because I don't want to be associated with that shit. The reason I would never be a cop is I don't want to be associated with that shit. And you cannot disassociate yourself from that if you are wearing that uniform. Like, fundamentally, there's the case that we've got, like, until all of that shit has been fixed one way or the other, either by abolishing the fucking police or by like a radical restructuring of what police are and what police do, until those problems are solved, until those things don't exist anymore, you cannot look at me and be like, oh, don't judge me. I'm a sensitive snowflake who can kill you because the state gave me that power. Like, I just don't want to fucking hear it. It has zero traction with me. However, I do think it's important to bear in mind here that, yeah, like you said, a lot of these people lost their minds because all of a sudden they were being treated, like trespassers, because they were. And they thought the cops were all going to be on their side. And apparently some of the cops were on their side. Apparently some of the cops let them in. Apparently some of the cops were just taking selfies with them. Like, the whole call coming from the inside of the house kind of thing seems to be playing out in real time as the Capitol Police is investigating and firing and, charging people. And I imagine that's going to happen. You're going to see that taking place with other police departments in the DC area and with the National Guard, potentially, definitely with active duty military, people who traveled there to do this, or people who are in the Guard and Reserves, etc. Will they recall retirees to active duty and UCMJ them? Probably not, but that would be fucking hilarious. Nothing would make me happier than seeing some of these fucking losers get stripped of their pensions for being idiots. That would make me, oh God, I would be so happy. I'd be like, look at you, you fucking idiot. You could have had your mouth in the government tit for the rest of your life. You could have been 40 years old getting fucking paid forever. Getting paid more than most people making a job where they actually work for a living. Doing nothing at all. Nothing anymore because you spent 20 years in uniform. But you had to fucking get Q-pilled. And guess what? Now you don't get shit. I would fucking love that. But because I would love that so much, I just have a feeling that's not going to happen.
That's all right. It's, and certainly, I'm going to backtrack myself. I'm not, I 100% agree with you on the cops and the military. And yeah, you don't, like, I can't imagine being a cop, like, after these last 5-6 years, watching watching people in uniform do all of these things. Like, it just doesn't, it's a circle I can't square.
But also, the thing about it is, I would jump into, and I want to let you talk, but I just want to say this too, is that it's also, to me, the one difference between being a cop and being a troop is that it's very, very easy to become a troop. It's not that easy to become a cop. It's very, very easy to quit being a cop. It's almost impossible to quit being a troop until your time is up, unless you do something to get kicked out. But the consequences of that can be so challenging for people that, like, people will take, I know people who have taken stands who were braver than I was. Let's be perfectly honest. Like, I admire them, and I didn't do that, even when I started to feel like I'm on the wrong side here. But it's very unlikely that people are going to do that en masse because they make the consequences so unpleasant for them. Whereas if you want to be a cop, like, unless you're on contract, like, you're contracted out for a certain period of time, as I understand it, you can just be like, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me, and you can literally quit to, like, that minute and not be a cop anymore. You emphatically cannot do that if you were a troop.
Yeah, you do that as a troop, and there's a good chance you're going to go to jail.
Yeah, you'll go. You can very easily go to prison for that, and then also have big things that make it almost impossible, for example, for you to get, you certainly won't get veterans benefits, and you also sometimes can be, depending on how they characterize what they have punished you with, you could be, for example, banned from getting student loans, banned from public housing, banned from basically any job that deals with state stuff. And I mean, depending on private sector employment, it can be also very challenging to, you're better off basically just pretending you lived in a cave for 4 years than admitting that you were, given a bad conduct discharge or other than honorable.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to come back from. But also, to be fair, it's 2021. Like, nobody's joining the army. Like, I joined the army with this, like, oh, the army doesn't really do anything. Just wear the green suits and it's fine. And then maybe I'll get to go to Bosnia for 6 months. That'll be fun. And then war happened. Now, to be fair, I did re-enlist 2 more times, so that shit's on me. But in the military, look, if you're 17, 18, you're dumb. We understand that. You're going to do it. You're going to do the dumb things that you're going to do. But for the rest of us, there's really no excuse, man. But hey, also do what you got to do to survive, I guess. Just understand that being in the military puts you into it's going to put you into some bad situations, and fingers crossed things are going to get a little bit better in the military. Maybe people will start taking the white supremacy that's very prevalent in the ranks serious, at least on the upside right now. If and when command comes through and says, all right, who are the Nazis, it's not going to be hard to point them out because they're always very open about who they are.
Very obviously running around doing Nazi shit. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day because some of the people that were photographed in like all sorts of cool guy kit and things like that, entering the building, were people with patches indicating that they're members of an organization called the Oath Keepers. And as I understand the Oath Keepers, this started after Obama was elected in 2008 and inaugurated in 2009. We've talked about this. You and I have talked about this. A lot of smarter people than me have talked about this, that I feel as though white Americans of a certain stripe apparently underwent such a tremendous psychological upset, inversion, if you will, complete collapse of their worldview because a black man was elected president, that it did create these echoes. And I think Trump is one of them, but there are quite a few others. And as I understand it, the Oath Keepers, hilariously, justified their existence as an organization of people in the military and veterans who refused to take up arms against civilians because they wanted to uphold their oath to the Constitution. Now, their big thing, the thing that they really lose their minds about, is the idea that we're going to take away access to guns, or that we're going to, eliminate certain kinds of weapons for civilian purchase. I saw some losers who are usually, making jokes about helicopter rides and so on, crying little crocodile tears because after their friends went and did fucking fascism shit, they're like, oh, I guess we're going to lose access to fucking high capacity mags. And it's like, I would actually be happier if you lost access to VA facilities because they put you in fucking prison. But you know what? Like, different strokes for different folks. That being said, the Oath Keepers, like, they were not particularly subtle. I remember seeing people on post in Fort Richardson in 2010, 2011 with Oath Keepers stuff on their cars. I remember one guy had a big Oath Keepers, like a Ranger tab, but it said Oath Keepers on the back glass of his truck, which, I mean... It would be, to me, I don't know if that's still the case, if people are still doing that. The last time I was on a military facility was in the U.S., like the continental U.S., if you will, was in the very, very beginning of 2013. Because I PCS to Korea, and then I separated in Korea. And so I haven't been back on like a regular U.S. installation in 8 years. But what I'm saying is that stuff was not subtle at all. And, Confederate flags are one thing, but like I've seen folks sharing stuff with like the Kekistan flags and like, stuff along the lines of Rhodesia flags or apartheid South Africa flags, that kind of stuff. That's all pretty regularly out there. I mean, Proud Boys, Identity Europa, groups like that have lots of former military in them. I remember one of the big Identity Europa guys was a enlisted Marine or former enlisted Marine. Proud Boys people, invariably you'll encounter folks who are in the military because they'll never shut the fuck up about it. And if they do actually want to clean house, I feel like it won't be hard, but it's gonna have to be, and this is why I don't think it's actually going to happen. It's going to be all sorts of people. Like, folks want to imagine that it's just crazy privates or like Nazis who deliberately enlisted and it's like, it's not that. Most of the Nazis don't join or can't get in because of their tattoos. Like, they stopped enforcing that like greatly. I mean, I had a couple of soldiers who had to get them covered up, and I certainly wonder what their beliefs are now. But
right.
But like most of these people, it's not Nazis joining to like get military training. It's people who join the military who get radicalized while they're in the military.
Yeah, it's not hard. It's not hard to. I mean, come on. For the last 20 years, what have we been talking about other than those dirty brown Muslims?
Well, I mean, you and I both got radicalized. We didn't get radicalized towards right wing shit. That's the thing, right? Like,
yeah.
I got radicalized because I realized just how much of a, that we were basically fighting a war with the intention of just dumping money into an active volcano and every now and then throwing a few bodies in there too, and that it was never going to be resolved. It was just making a lot of money. And like, maybe that sounds like, your absolute most like vulgar Marxist take on things, but I don't know how else to look at it. I mean, when I'm, friend of the show, Kevin Frint, was deployed before he got out of the army. He spent time doing the same shit that I did literally 10 years prior in the same places, and nothing had changed. Like,
no.
So what you think about the hundreds of billions of dollars that get spent on that war every year, and nothing changes. Like, so it's hard to come away from that experience without being radicalized. But I do think that, to be honest, most people, when they get radicalized by their experiences in the military, they wind up getting radicalized towards the right. And I think, I don't know, for instance, I want to know why. I have an idea of why I think that is, but I'm interested in your take.
On why it's easy to radicalize?
Why people in the military, when they get radicalized, why does the military radicalize people towards the right?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. What does the army do? We fight and we kill. Fighting and killing is, the idea that my will and my politics and my beliefs need to be imposed through violence is generally a right-wing kind of feeling. Now, notwithstanding the Russians and the French at various multiple times throughout their history, it's, in America, it's violence is freedom. How did we become a country? We fought for it. We shot people. We were violent. We used guns, and we enshrined guns into our rules to say, look, we fought for this. We did violence to gain what we have, and we need to make sure that we have access to violence to be able to keep what we have. Because the early mindset of America is this was born out of violence and it will be kept with violence. And if you listen to the way any of these people talk, they say the First Amendment is protected by the Second Amendment, which is ridiculous. Like, you don't need a gun to protect the First Amendment. You need politicians who care about these things. You need to vote people in. You need people that care about these things. You need discussion. You don't need a gun because, I mean, number one, nobody knows what freedom of speech means. Even Josh Hawley, who went to Yale and Oxford, is sitting here saying that Twitter kicking Trump off is a violation of free speech. It's not. It's literally not. It's not. That's not what the First Amendment is. But it doesn't matter. So I really believe that it's easy to radicalize because for us, if you're not willing to do violence to keep America going, then you must be some shit-headed leftist. Because I don't want to do violence to keep America going. I want to do policy. I want to talk. I know it's not popular, but like, look, y'all out there, you don't want to go through a civil war. I'm telling you right now, you don't want to go through a war. I've seen countries that go through it. Like, Nate, you and I have both been in these countries that, like, we were a part of, and it's horrifying. It's, even in Afghanistan, man, like, those poor people, if they're still stepping on fucking Soviet era landmines out there, man. It's not a great way to live, and it's going to take decades, if not centuries, to kind of pull yourself up out of that. So,
I mean, I think that when you it's a lot harder to romanticize what war means when you've had to, deal with dead, exploded children, for example. It's unless you're a sociopath, and that's what happens in war. And to me, at least, I think that the funny thing is the idea that the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment is hilarious, because I think you're going to see this with how this stuff gets approached based on what happened last week. It's far more likely that this approach of we're threatening violence and we're delivering violence to our politicians to keep them in line is actually just going to make them want to strengthen the security state even more and clamp down even harder on people. So in a way,
Patriot Act 2.0 is already coming.
Yeah, and it's not like they lack for any powers already. This is just, they're just going to grant them more and grant them more funding. I think that's my prediction. Honestly, my reasoning on why I think the military creates so many right-wing radicalized people versus left-wing is that very few people come out of the experience of the military seeing like what sort of the state can do, and then extrapolate that towards how it could be used towards peaceful improvements in people's lives. More people come away from it with an idea of how society should function, modeled on their experience in the military. And that is, to me, the military is inherently authoritarian. I mean, it's by definition authoritarian. But the reason why the military model cannot be applied to society at large is because the military functions in a way that when you can't perform its functions anymore, you are useless and have to be discarded. And that's where the fascism comes in, because if a soldier can't meet a certain standard, if a soldier is disabled, hurt, sick, weak, dealing with things, can't function. If he either in the process of like someone's going to be chaptered or someone's going to be med boarded out, either way, they are made invisible. They are disappeared because they can't function in the role they're supposed to function in.
Yeah. The idea that the military is a quote socialist organization is absolutely insane, unless you're like considering the most brutal forms of communism, whereupon if you can no longer work, you're just basically sent to a death camp or a work camp and worked to death. Like the military, if you lose a leg. There's definitely soldiers who lose a leg in Iraq and they still manage to find their way in the military. But if the military breaks your brain so much that like you can't function anymore because you had to go to a dumb war and see a lot of horrifying shit, you're just basically out on your own.
I mean, I remember when I was out processing at Fort Bragg, because I was leaving the SF course to go to Korea so I could then get out of the Army. There was a soldier who was out processing at the same time as me, who was young, in shape, probably in early 20s, maybe even late teens, and he was an 18 X-ray. So he had enlisted in a program that, if you graduate, you go from on the street to like 18 months later or so, 24 months later, you're a Green Beret. He had broken his ankle during land nav, and the doctor who had attended to it had fucked something up so badly that like he was going to walk with a limp for the rest of his life, and he was being med boarded out. And also, I mean, I understand why this is done, but just in the military, if you receive that kind of substandard care, you don't have the right to sue for malpractice. You basically sign away that right. So he was going to be on disability, but not only was he not getting to do the thing that he joined the military to do, but he was going to be disabled for the rest of his life. And that's the kind of thing that happens. They got rid of him. They had no use for a specialist who had a limp. So they're like, nope, you can't be in the Army anymore. And if you extrapolate that to larger society, then you do start to enter into what we would consider sort of a tenet of fascism, that the weak must be destroyed and purged.
Yeah. Do you think there's anybody who's permanently in a wheelchair in the military?
Unless they're there as, I'm going to sound like an asshole for saying this, but unless they're there as like a mascot, like to do some sort of there was a guy when I went through who was blinded in Iraq, and he was allowed to stay in as an officer because it was like inspirational, but he was also super, super Christian, and it was just sort of this thing like, well, if he can do it, why can't you, kind of thing. But they kept him in because they made an exception for him because he was kind of a mascot. That's not most people, and so you are discarded. If a society functions that way, it's like you said, it goes beyond the excesses, the worst parts of the Soviet Union, and becomes more like something like the Khmer Rouge. It starts becoming unsustainably that there isn't really a comparison. In my opinion, I don't know enough about the subject matter, but I don't believe there is a comparison in, let's say, the Eastern Bloc or the Soviet Union or like the sort of the communist world during the Cold War, aside from extreme examples in Cambodia. I think the only thing you can really compare that to is the Nazis, which I realize is a very overused comparison. But I mean, when I think about, societies that were intentionally euthanizing human beings because they were, disabled.
Based on worth. Based on
an assessment of their worth, based on their race, their gender identity, their sexual orientation, their religion, their disability status, like those kinds of things. You say, if you don't fit the mold, then you have to die, or you have to be eliminated. Then that's fascism. That's a particular kind of authoritarianism. And what you're seeing, like I said, that's not to say like the military isn't killing you. The military isn't eliminating you in the sense of like ending your life, but they are kicking you out of the sort of the structure, like the organization. You can't be in the organization if you don't have worth as it's assessed by them. And so to me, when that mentality of like the weak are worthless and must be purged, the further you go into like combat arms stuff, in my experience, the more you start to experience that, the more you encounter that. If you're fat, you got to go. If you're, if you're weak, you got to go. If you can't hack certain physical things, you got to go. If you can't shoot straight enough, you got to go. Like all these things, you got to go. You can't be in if you can't do these things, so we're going to get rid of you. That mentality.
I'm sure that you've seen people who injure themselves in the military and don't say anything about it, and can try to do I'm just going to keep on rucking. I'm going to drink some water and go on, and then hurt themselves more. Hurt themselves to a permanent
point
place
where they have a permanent disability. Yeah. All the time, all the time, because the worst thing is to be, you're a profile ranger, you're writing a medical profile, you know what I mean? Like, and if you're on profile, you get so much pressure to come off it, like even if you're not ready to come off it. That's the way, especially junior soldiers, they get bullied into coming off profile early and stuff, and like, they get physically damaged from it. They wind up with permanent disabilities or permanent disfigurements from it. Like, so that meant to me, that mentality of like, basically the weak are undeserving and must be eliminated, cannot be accommodated, cannot be tolerated. To me, it's natural to take that next step and say, I want a society that runs on this same principle. And that to me is why you start to see some of like the really blood and soil stuff. Also, I mean, obviously like the trauma of being in combat and, especially like, I think much like if you consume British media at face value, you'll be driven insane. You'll be an insane Islamophobe and transphobe. If you consume the sort of the way the military portrays and like tells stories to itself about what deployment is and does and what it means, like you'll come away from it thinking that we're in some like millenarian conflict with Islam. So it doesn't surprise me that's the overwhelming majority, it seems, of people who come out who are radicalized towards the right. And I think that there's friend of the show, I suppose. He's given us some shout outs in the past. Spencer Ackerman has commented he's written a book about the war on terror kind of coming home. And his book is called The Reign of Terror. It's coming out, I think, in May. And I'm hoping we can get him on to talk about it. But I think that so much of this is the consequence of, 20 years of permanent warfare in America. And I think that anyone who's been in uniform knows somebody who's like this. And anybody who's been in uniform who, is still connected with folks from their old units on social media has seen someone like this and has seen someone who supported the Bundy Ranch thing and had seen people who supported the Malheur wildlife refuge thing, the occupations that the far-right militias did. Like you saw people who were in favor of this. This should come as no surprise. And do I think they'll clean house? Not really. Maybe they'll go after the low-hanging fruit, but I personally feel, I think back on the folks who, who were really into hardcore Rush Limbaugh birtherism about Obama when Obama was the president. I think about, the Special Forces colonel who addressed my class when we got selected after selection was done and we were just doing the out processing, that like we needed to sharpen our skill set so we could use it against our own tyrannical government. Like, I think about those people, like, folks that I respect have expressed dismay or confusion as to how a guy like Mike Flynn could happen. And it's like, I'll tell you how a guy like Mike Flynn happens. Take the opinions of, let's say, 1 in every 5 field grade officers in the U.S. Army and then just make him really good at running.
Right.
That's how you get General Flynn.
Take 5 lieutenants, make them all generals, and at least one of them is going to be fucking crazy pants.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that with that idiot lieutenant who made the Holocaust joke on his TikTok. He's getting separated.
He's finally getting separated. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? None of this is new. This is all stuff that we've talked about on this show. And I wasn't trying to put you on the spot, Francis. It's more just that I think that there is a mentality that we share in common with a lot of folks who are involved with the sort of law enforcement superstructure, if you will. That we say to ourselves, well, I'm not an extremist. I'm not a racist. I don't commit violence arbitrarily. I've never done any of this stuff. I'm one of the good ones. And I think the point is that what we're seeing in recent years, what we've been seeing, or rather, what's been true forever, but what's becoming more and more undeniable in terms of just like the stuff that's being even reported in the media and what people are becoming aware of, is that there really can be no distinction so long as an organization exists that is committing these acts. Mm-hmm. If members of that organization are committing these acts, then that organization is no better than its worst members. And the solution isn't fucking, awareness training. The solution is completely upending this shit root and branch, just starting over again.
Yeah, it is. I do think that there is merit to somebody wanting to try and change the system. It's just, you have to understand that the system is rotten all the way to the roots. And
that's the thing, is that a guy like you and me, Francis, like our opinions on what we talk about, how we talk about the military, for example, and how we talk about politics in America, politics in the world, what America's role should be, what the military's role should be, how a society should function. There is no way that if we were honest about how we feel and believe while in uniform, that we would be allowed to go to senior positions of responsibility. Like, this would eventually end our careers. The opposite is not true in terms of politics. You can be Mike Flynn, you can be these crazy colonels we're describing, and you can go on full QAnon shit, and it requires so much more indiscretion before it actually affects you.
Mm-hmm.
And the point being, so if you say to yourself, I'm going to change it from the inside, I'm going to reform it. Well, the thing about it is that you cannot get to that point where you'd have any power, not even pretending for a second that you could do it yourself without buy-in from everyone else. You will never get there with those views. You simply will not. They will not allow it. The system is not built to allow it. The system, however, is perfectly fine with, kill commies for Christ people, or Mike Flynn, like the Muslim Brotherhood controls Venezuela through a series of tubes. Like, all that shit, that's fine. That's the cost of doing business. My big take here is that none of this should surprise you if you are honest with yourself about how prevalent this is in the military. And the fact that some of them got too fucking wild on the Kool-Aid and decided to go and try to invade the Capitol, that shouldn't come as a surprise either.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you had a lot of violence getting ready to pop, and here's where it pops. And there's going to be a lot of, hopefully a lot of soul searching on that one from a lot of people in the military. Because now you have to consider, are the people to my right and left, are they the ones who would be doing this? And you know what, man, I had a supply sergeant who told me that the moon landings were fucking fake. So it's not hard. If you hear that from somebody, it's immediately just like, I assume you're crazy and probably a QAnon person. But, somebody like that is, he's talking about conspiracies all day long. As soon as I say, you know what, it'd be really cool if, the people owned the means of their own production and didn't have to give up their labor to a capitalist class, suddenly I need to get thrown out of a helicopter. So, I don't know, man. You're just never on friendly grounds when you're a leftist in the military. Shit, we're not in friendly grounds, in general. Being on the left, and by saying we should be nice to each other, but fucking the Romans nailed a guy to a tree 2,000 years ago for saying you should be nice to one another, so it shouldn't be surprising.
We're past the point of it being directly, like these people themselves were in that role, but if you're in the military now, you have senior leaders who were junior members of the military when there were still people in who had fought in Korea and Vietnam who would full on be like, we're a Christian army delivering people from communism because communism is atheism and godlessness, and we have to enforce Christianity. Like, that mentality was not particularly uncommon, and you got to realize that the people who invaded Grenada and killed a bunch of people because it was apparently Grenada was doing too much social justice. I mean, I know it's more complicated than that, but yeah, you understand. Those people, were in the army. Those were senior leaders when I first came in. The people who Vietnam's a little further back, but you'd still encounter people who'd been enlisted in Vietnam and become officers. Certainly in the reserves and guard, you would encounter those people. And the people who you met who were, first started their terms of service in the early 80s, the folks who trained them were all Vietnam vets and Korea vets and Grenada vets, Panama vets, Desert Storm vets. Like, you got to realize that, we've been the blunt instrument of American foreign policy. That's our job. That's what we did, whether we like it or not. So the idea that you think that we're like, I'm going to reform, I can address these attitudes and we can reform the military towards being more social justice oriented or something along those lines. Like, I'm sorry, but you got to have a long look at yourself. Like, look at the organization you're a member of.
I can change him, Nate.
Right, exactly.
He just needs me to love him a little bit more, and then the army will stop being horribly fascistic and bloody and violent and brutal. If I just love them enough.
I was to say, I could change them. I could fix them. Anyway, Francis, let's talk about the bonus.
Yeah, so I got Joe and Carrie Shockey to watch the 1992 Disney labor movie Newsies. Neither of them had seen it because it's a musical, and they're just not musical guys, but I made them watch it. So here's a little clip from that.
This is really interesting in that way that this is a part of, you get a lot of labor history in the United States that's, kind of that centers around Jimmy Hoffa and kind of goes from, the 30s and the 40s into the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. You don't really see very much of anything that is kind of this this turn of the century period. Sorry, that was a lot all at once.
I'm going to also say one of the other strike leaders was Henry Butler, and his name was Major Butts.
That was actually my old roller derby nickname.
Major Butts. Yeah, so eventually, by the way, Kid Blink, after all of this, he worked various jobs and then became a saloon keeper and then died of tuberculosis at the age of 32.
God damn, he had the most 1800s life on Earth. I can't even fake a good New York accent, but just imagine, I got the consumption.
You grew up a poor street urchin. You led a labor movement, and then you died of tuberculosis in a bar. Congratulations, kid! You're a New Yorker now.
The only thing missing is that he didn't get maimed in some war. He just got that from some machining accident.
Just gets his fingers torn off by a printing press.
All right, so the film Newsies. I apologize for not warning you, Joe, that it's not that it was a musical, but
that's right. I got one for you, motherfucker.
You're gonna make me watch Reign of Fire, aren't you? Again,
maybe.
I already know how bad that movie is.
It's got tanks. It's got dragons. It's a classic.
I know. It's got dragons and tankers. It's right up your fucking alley.
And it has Christian Bale.
Joe just recommending any movie. It's got tanks.
And it's got Christian Bale.
We got singing Batman. We have tanker Batman. We got everything.
We've got serial killer Batman. We've got machinist Batman. We got skinny Batman.
Oh yeah, I've never seen that movie, but it looks fucking creepy.
It is. It's a while. It's the movie he did right before Batman 2, so he had to gain 100 pounds right after losing 100 pounds. That man has done some fucked up things to his body.
That dude's heart is probably as depressed as most of us.
That dude has done fucked up things to his body, says a guy who spent 20 years in the military and is currently a little drunk and a little stoned. Okay, so the Newsies musical, did it stir something in your heart? I mean, this labor movement from Disney of all fucking places, but then again, 1992 Disney is very different than 2021 Disney. But did you guys enjoy yourself? Did you feel the love of just people getting together and fighting for a common cause? That silence tells me everything. All right, no,
it honestly just made me curious what like Disney's labor history is, and I'm assuming it's not good.
It's not good at all.
Have you ever seen have you ever seen the picket signs from the 40s?
No.
Yeah. Walt Disney was very bad for unions. No, he did not like unions.
Did he blame that on the Jews too, like everything else?
I mean,
he wasn't as anti-Semitic as people say. He was only a normal
it's
amount
a hell of a
qualifier,
Francis.
I know. Like I said, he was the normal amount of anti-Semitic that a white male.
He's only like 2/3 of a Henry Ford.
Right.
It's a relative measure.
Yeah, he was the Nikola Tesla of Henry Fords.
He's kind of the guy who's just like, watching World War II and it's just like, we'll see how this plays out. Just kind of shrugs and it's just like, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing and we'll see how it plays out.
Just waving a little pennant like Homer Simpson, but it says both sides.
Yeah, he should have been doing what Dr. Seuss did, which was make really racist anti-war stuff. Like,
Dr. Seuss and pretty much everybody else.
You could never accuse Dr. Seuss of having one in for fucking Emperor Hirohito.
Yeah, you got to. Of all the things about Dr. Seuss, he was a patriot. He loved America.
He hated everyone who wasn't white.
Anyway, so the movie Newsies. The movie Newsies. Like I said, one of my favorite movies. It starts out, we meet Christian Bale, cowboy Jack Kelly, one of the many struggling newspaper hawkers. We meet Mr. Wiesel. We meet Vinny from Doogie Howser, who has not really done much else since then. I
thought I recognized him, but I wasn't sure.
I remember
from where.
being very exactly. I remember when I first watched Newsies when I was 10 or whatever, and just being like, "Oh my god, it's Doogie's friend is in this movie. He's gonna go so far." I can't think of literally any other movie I've seen him in.
To be fair, at this point, nobody saw Neil Patrick Harris going anywhere either.
And then
that man had a fucking turnaround, didn't he?
Yeah, it was the Doogie Renaissance, man.
Doogie Renaissance.
Yeah, look,
How I Met Your Mother.
How I Met Your Mother not only gave us back Doogie Howser, but it gave us back Allison Hannigan from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So
it almost lets me forgive the ending. Almost.
I don't. Look, I read about it. I stopped watching that movie. I had to stop because it was so.
It doesn't age
goddamn
well.
Bad. I mean, none of that shit ages well. There's no movie that ages well. Newsies ages well, but I mean, also it doesn't mention like the violent racism of the 1900s. It's just like we have a black newsie and he's our friend, and nobody's gonna make it
Question
weird.
that. Yeah,
right.
No one's gonna talk about the fact that like he was born in slavery.
No, this is 1899. His parents were born in slavery.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Thank you.
Yeah, my bad.
Please, Joe.
I didn't mean to slander the fine racial harmony of 1800s New York. I apologize.
Yeah, no, please. It was his, and his parents might not have been, necessarily in slavery. They might have been, cowering in fear during the 1863 draft riots.
That's fair.
There's
literally so many options here.
And they're all bad.
All of them sad. All of them very sad. So we meet Cowboy. He's living in this this kind of home for wayward newsies, I guess. The newsboys, they all just live in a dormitory, like somehow. For some reason,
shelter, but for newsies.
They live in a place that honestly looks better than most barracks.
Yeah, that's true.
These places existed because this is 1899. They weren't just like, put a Jamba Juice in there. God damn it. Don't just let a bunch of fucking street urchins live there. They're like, no, let the urchins live there. We have no use for this right now. We don't know what Jamba Juice is yet, so give us time.
Yeah, now
we collapse in a week anyway.
Allow us to gentrify this when we're ready.
We grind up the urchins for Jamba Juice now.
Exactly.
Next time a strong wind comes through, half this building might get set on fire due to faulty installation, so who cares?
the door's open the wrong way, and that's going to kill about 300 people. But that's fun. That's fun. That's libertarianism. You know what? They chose to live in a place where the door is open the wrong way.
Just burning to death in the shirtwaist factory. Thank God for my freedom.
So they meet David and his little brother Les. Cowboy Jack decides to take him under his wing for some reason. They kind of smart mouth at each other for a little bit, and then Jack does that he does that thing where it's where the bully realizes that he's not going to be able to bully a guy, so then he just makes him his best friend. It reminds me very much of, and thankfully I can make this reference to you two, Jake Busey in Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
Right, when he's kind of an asshole to Rico, and then Rico's like, I don't give a fuck. You can beat me up or I'll beat you up. I don't give a shit. Let's do it. And he's just like, you can be my friend because I can't intimidate you.
That's how all male relationships work, right?
Exactly.
I mean, one of our main bonding moments was the time that I threw a knife at Shocks and it went through his hand and pinned it to the wall, just like in Starship Troopers.
If we were all in the same,
Joe in the knees, and as a tall guy, he has a long way to fall.
If we were all in the same room, we would be podcasting while doing a Indian leg wrestling to each other. Men are always trying to best each other. It's just how we are. It's fine.
I think you just said we'd engage in some just friends scissoring.
See, I was going to go with a deer hunter thing where we're just all sitting around casting a pod and just, passing a revolver around while we do it.
We're gonna do that. We're gonna do the thing that Shock said. We're all gonna oil ourselves up, take our shirts off, and try to climb a pole in a not gay way.
Shout out to the greasy pole in Gloucester, Massachusetts.
Is that actually a thing?
They're Gloucester boys. They're gonna climb that pole.
It's just still one of the weirdest fucking things I've ever been witness to.
Don't you guys also have a Mothman? No, that's in New Jersey.
That's Jersey, please. That's
please, our cryptids. We would never.
I don't.
Is there a difference between the two?
Everybody, as always, thank you. You can follow me at Army Strang, follow Nate at In These Deserts, follow the podcast A Hell of a Way. We're on Instagram. We've got the shop. We've got the writings. We got a little bit of everything all over the place, and lots and lots of bonus content coming. Got some stuff already recorded. So looking forward, new year, new us, brand new administration to be angry about. Very looking forward to that. But hey, man, there's a lot of rumblings, man. Maybe he's going to cancel student loan debt, and maybe a monkey will fly out of my ass. Who knows?
Who knows?
Everybody, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week.